Welcome to the Cook's Domain. Today I'm going to do a chicken katsu curry. I'm actually going to show you two methods. It's not a complicated dish, so it's quite easy to show you two ways to do this. The first way is the traditional method, if we can call it that. This is a relatively new dish even to Japan, but it's the way that it's mostly cooked, I guess. The second method is, I'm going to say it's my way of doing it, but I'd like to think that it's probably the way a top chef would cook it. But the way that it's done mostly, even by most people in Japan, from what I understand, I know it's definitely the way Wagamama's makes it, is to make a roux. So we're using flour, we're using a stock, chicken stock or whatever, so vegetable stock or whatever, to create a thick roux with loads and loads of curry powder, a little bit of sugar. Sometimes some of the recipes will add onion, and then you can either puree that down or melt it, or just cook it so much that the onion literally dissolves into the sauce. And it's by far the most popular one that you'll find on YouTube, if you want to make a very generic kind of sauce. I think though, if this was being made by a top-class chef, I don't think they would do it that way, because this isn't really a sauce. This is actually more like the juice of a stew. There's a lot more of it. I mean, curries are technically are a sort of just spicy stew to some degree. So I'm going to show you how to do it that way, and I think the advantages for that way are a couple. Firstly, I'm not adding extra starch and extra carbs that are just absolutely unnecessary to use flour as a thickener. So my view, my thinking, the way I make my katsu curry is this: why add that extra carb? It's unnecessary. Let's take a leaf out of the Indian cuisine and use vegetables as our thickening agent. So, and also you get more fiber, you get more minerals, you get more vitamins. It's no less healthier, so please don't think this is some sort of light version, some sort of healthy, untasty version. Texture will be very slightly different, where the traditional method has that gelatinous, floured, thickened version. This will be thickened naturally with vegetables. And I think the flavor will be far deeper, far rounder, far more balanced, because the traditional one needs sugar. I'm not really going to add sugar. The carrot and the onion that I'm going to be using is sweet enough. But if we wanted to add a little bit more sweetness, I'm going to add a little apple juice into my version again. So that's got a little bit more sweetness. And if you did want it any sweeter, you can just use a tiny amount of honey, which the traditional method doesn't have, just has white refined sugar. So I think there are lots of advantages to doing it the way I make it. I think it's a better quality version, and I think it's the kind of version a top-class chef would do if he was making it in his restaurant, or her restaurant, of course. But I'll show you both methods so you can look at them, try them out yourself, see which one you like better. Most definitely the traditional one is far easier and far quicker. Okay, so for the first part of making a katsu curry, we need to get our veg ready. And as you know, I'm making two types, so I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. For the traditional, the more accepted version of how to make this, all you need is half an onion chopped, about 5 grams of ginger chopped, and about the same in garlic chopped up. You don't need to chop it up particularly small. I've just done that because I was working on it, but this is all going to go now into a blender to turn it into a paste or a pulp or what have you, and that's all you will need for the traditional method. Now this part over here is an optional extra. It's just potatoes that have been roll cut like the Japanese like to do it, so they're all odd kind of shapes, and a little bit of carrot as well. This is an optional extra and not necessary. Because most of us are used to our katsu curry, especially if you're buying them from like some of the restaurants or the kind of places you can get your lunch in London, the Yitsus and the Wasabis, etc. Usually sell, I think, their katsu curry as just a smooth paste. I'm pretty sure Wagamama's is just a smooth sauce. But that's not necessarily so in Japan. It can come with bits in it, and usually it's bits of potato, bits of carrot. You could also have, bits of mushroom in there as well. It's up to you. So that's an optional extra. In a pan, we want to get a little bit of oil in there, just enough to cover the base. We want to get our heat on to a medium-low heat. So just under medium, basically. Okay, so once it starts to warm up, we can pour the puree in. As it starts to bubble, let's just start mixing that in. Now all we want to do is just let this kind of sweat. We want to cook away that onion raw flavor. And if it's bubbling too much, just turn the heat down even lower, bring it closer to low. Just give it a stir every now and again so it doesn't stick or anything. But don't rush this. We really want to cook those onions out, and the longer the better. As the water starts to evaporate from the onion, and all we're being left is with this, oily top, and the onions all coming together, we can now add our spices. Okay, so like regular curry powder, we're going to add half a teaspoon of turmeric. Garam Masala. Mix that all in so those spices can hydrate in the oily mixture. Now we don't want the spices to burn. Now you want to add 15 grams of plain white flour and mix that in too. And what you should get are these clumps. Now you want to just keep stirring them, keep spreading them, keep squishing them, and keep moving them around because they can stick and burn. And you just want to keep doing that for at least 2 minutes. We want to cook the flour out. Don't let anything stick to the bottom. Now what we're going to do is very carefully pour a splash in and start moving that around. Just a splash, and move that around. Just to incorporate that liquid, which it will do. See, there's no liquid in there now. We can now pour in another splash. And keep whisking that now. Keep moving it around. Add another little splash. Now what we can do here, because this is starting to lower the temperature, is increase the temperature up to medium. But you're going to have to keep stirring. Another little splash once it incorporates. And work that in. Gently at first so you're not getting all that liquid splashing up at you. And once it's incorporated it, work it in quite quickly. Another splash, but a bit more than a splash. Work it slowly and then work it quickly. That way we make sure we don't have any lumps. Okay, so once we've got it to a reasonable kind of thickness that we're looking for, and you can just leave this on the heat if you want it even more thicker. But what we want to do now is a little taste test. Firstly for sweetness, which is definitely going to need, but also for salt and for black pepper. I'm going to add a teaspoon of sugar. But do the sweetness to your own tastes. Some salt. I'm going to add a couple of pinches here. I'm also going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of finely ground black pepper. And I'm doing that because I want this to stay smooth. I don't want bits of pepper or flecks of pepper in it. But that would be your choice. Let's mix that in. And there we have it. One chicken katsu sauce. It's a very quick, easy method, as you can see. Nothing very fantastic about it. And definitely probably more to what you're used to in the restaurants. For my method, we've got a whole onion that's been diced and diced quite finely. We have a stalk of celery that's been diced very finely. We have half a carrot, and that's half a large carrot or one small carrot that's been diced. We have about 10 grams of ginger diced finely, and about 10 grams again of garlic. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I would make this, which isn't that different. I'm just not going to be using flour as a thickener, and I think this way I get more vitamins, more minerals, and more fiber into this dish. Alright, so we want to put our pan onto a medium, or just slightly under medium heat. We want to get some oil in there, enough to cover the base. We don't want it particularly hot. We can now add the onions, our celery and our carrots. Just make sure all of these bits have been coated in a little bit of oil. We want to immediately add some salt, a couple of pinches. By no means is this all the salt we're going to need in this recipe. The reason we add salt is the salt helps draw out the moisture from these vegetables, because we want the water out, and it just helps the sweating process. Just give it a little mix every now and again. We don't want the same lot to be making contact with the bottom there and browning. Okay, so a lot of the liquid that came out of the onions and the carrots is now evaporated. Everything's softened beautifully, and all we have is just the glisten of the oil. So now it's time to blush our spices. So to this we're going to add curry powder, 1 teaspoon of turmeric. We want a ½ teaspoon of Garam Masala. Let's mix those in and blush those spices, rehydrate them. And we're still on a medium heat. Just give them a second. Okay, so to this I'm now going to add a cup of apple juice. And that was quite cool, so we're then going to have to turn our heat up to bring it up to temperature. Let's mix that in. And 2 cups of chicken stock. What we want to do now is cook this down till it reduces by about half. So I've got it on a high heat, and as soon as it starts to boil I'll turn it down to medium, so we just have a nice simmer and just let it reduce. Okay, so while our sauce is simmering down, we need to deal with our chicken breasts. Now what we're going to do, we want to flatten them out. The reason for that is for even cooking. As you can see, one side of the breast is a lot thicker than the other side, so we're going to bash these down to try and flatten them out. Now what I do is I give this side, the really thick side, a much more of a beating than I do this side. And I'm trying to get it to be roughly the same level. That's about right for that one. There we go. Now we have 2 pieces of chicken that are roughly even in their thickness. Now, what you can do, if you're less fussy, is start trimming the edges to make perfect shapes. I don't bother with that. I paid good money for this, so I want to eat it. Okay, so it's now time to bread our chicken. What I have here is 50 grams of flour. To that, I have ground to an absolute powder 5 grams of salt, which I'm going to mix into the flour. And I also have 1.5 grams of white pepper, and white because we don't want to have color in the mix, and only 1.5 because it's got more of a pepper flavor than black. If you want to use black, then probably use 2 or 2 and a bit grams. Because there's no actual white peppers, by the way. I don't know whether a lot of people know that or not. White pepper is simply black pepper that's had the outer shell removed. So when you grind whole black peppercorns, or if you have one of those grinders, you're technically getting a mix of what is white and what is black, the black outside and the white inside. Anyway, give that a good mix with your fork. Make sure that the salt and the pepper are completely mixed in with your flour. And then get that into your dish that you're going to use to prepare your chicken with. Okay, so the next part of the process is egg. And the last thing is our breadcrumb. This is panko, so it's a genuine Japanese breadcrumb. But if you don't have any panko and you just want to use ordinary white breadcrumb, that'll work just as fine. Okay, so let's bread these up. So we've got our flattened chicken pieces. All we want to do is get it into the flour. Make sure it's completely coated in flour. Let's turn it over. In here I have 2 eggs that have been well beaten. And that's the next job. Now I want to keep this hand dry, so I'm now going to move over to this hand and drop this into the flour, into the egg. And I'm going to pick it up, put it down on the other side into the egg yolk. Now we're using the wet hand, I'm going to drop it into the panko. Now using the dry hand, I'm going to pick some of that up just to create a little handle for me here on the edge for my dry hand to be able to pick this up without getting wet. Turning it around, coming this side, and that way this hand stays dry. And there we go. There's our first piece breaded. Just shake off the excess, put it down on a plate, ready for frying. Okay, so our sauce is reduced by half, and to be fair, I think we could let it reduce a little more before we go to the next step, which is to hand blitz it. Now, you can really hand blitz it at any point. The difference being is that if you leave it like this, you can actually walk away from it and leave it alone, because water itself never burns and the other things are suspended in it. If we blitz it and it all becomes a homogeneous thing of all the fibers of the different vegetables, then that can burn if you walk away from it. That's going to need constant stirring. So I leave it for as long as possible before I blitz. So what I'm going to do is just let it reduce a little bit more, and then we'll blitz it. Okay, once we've reduced it further, now we can mix it with our hand blender. I've turned the heat right down to the very lowest it can go, and we're going to blend it up and see what our thickness and consistency is like. We're going to have to maybe let it boil down a little more, but we're going to have to be on top of it to keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't burn. Okay, now that we've blended it to a smooth sauce, it's still a little too watery for me. So what we're going to do is just turn the heat up a little bit and cook it down a little further. And remember to keep stirring so that this doesn't stick at the bottom. Okay, now that we've thickened it a little closer to our liking, we can begin seasoning. Now I don't season, just so that you know why we do what we do, we don't season when this is a lot of water, because we won't be able to tell how salty or how peppery this would be once it reduces. We could end up putting way too much salt. So now that we've reduced it to roughly where we want it, I'm going to add a tablespoon of soy sauce. Mix that in. Okay, we're going to do our first taste test. All I think it needs is a little black pepper. So I'm just going to put maybe half a teaspoon of black pepper. Let's whisk that in as well. We'll give that just a second to infuse. Okay, let's try it. Wow, I think that's really good. Okay, so this sauce is pretty much ready now. Okay, the only other addition you can do, depends on how spicy that you like your katsu curry. You can add coconut milk. You can do that to either of the methods I've shown you. Add coconut milk, and for one portion you're only looking at about 100 mils of coconut, just to mellow it out. I know some restaurants do add it. There are many recipes that do not add it. It's completely up to you. Okay, as you can see, the consistency of the one we have now. Okay, so now it's time to fry the chicken. We've got a pan onto the hob, about a ½ inch of oil in the bottom of that pan, and medium to high heat, so just slightly above medium. Okay, with our oil roughly at temperature, We can lay these in. As you can see, it's not a particularly vigorous fry. We don't want to burn the breadcrumb and have raw chicken on the inside. It's going to take about 5 minutes each side. Okay, let's turn this around. If it's getting a little too vigorous, don't be afraid to turn your heat down to medium. So there's our chicken, perfectly cooked, sliced, bit of white jasmine rice, sticky rice, and now it's time to serve. This is the one that I made using the traditional or the most usual recipe method. Like I said, you can add a little coconut milk to this so that you can mellow it out. I think the Wagamama recipe does have some coconut milk in it, so if that's what you're really after, that kind of a flavor, then do this and add the Wagamama coconut milk. And then remember to adjust the salt and the sugar to your liking. I've done that with this. I'm not going to add the coconut milk because I like my curries to be a bit on the spicy side, and I think the coconut milk just mellows it too much out. The only thing I will show you is that, you know, the consistency for this curry is about right. It's quite thick. I mean, you can thicken it a little more, but here's the problem. I should now pour this. You know, it's not bad. It tastes like a curry, you know, it has that curry flavor. And now I need to pour it onto this chicken to show you guys what this looks like. I'm just not a big fan of this, and I just don't want to waste the chicken. I think my one is better. Let's talk about that one. This one is, as you can see, just as thick, if not thicker. It's got a much darker flavor, much darker color. It's got a much more wholesome flavor. It's got a sweetness. It's just deeper. The savoriness is deeper. I find this to be quite two-dimensional. It just seems to be like almost a gelatinous curry powder, just like you've turned a curry powder into some sort of liquid. So I'm not a big fan of this, personally. All right, this is my one. And I just think that has an overall a far superior taste and flavour. I think the texture is a lot better. I also know that it's slightly healthier for you. This, by no means is this a healthy dish, but there's minerals and vitamins and fibre that this doesn't have. So I can't by any means really recommend that. But please give that a go. Give my one a go. See what you think. The other thing that you can add, and ordinarily I would cook it in the sauce, but I wanted you guys to see it as a pure sauce, is to cook those potatoes and those carrots that I said to you earlier. All I've done is I've just boiled them gently in a little salty water for them to have a little bit of a seasoning. Okay, it's time for the taste test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice one piece of chicken here. Just get a little spoon of this rice. Okay, let's see what we think. Let's grab a bit of that. Get some of the rice on there. Is it terrible? No. Tastes like a katsu chicken curry to me that I've had in many places. Very mild, very generic. It's okay. Let's try this one. Let's get a bit more sauce on there. A little bit of the rice. In my opinion, it doesn't compare. This is something I expect to get from a very fast food kind of place. And this is what I would expect to get in a really nice place. It's they're the same flavor profile, clearly, because they're using the curry powder. But there is a world of difference between them in taste, flavor, texture, umami. It's incredible, the difference. So yeah, if you want to make it quick and easy, you can make this Wagamama version. Pour in a little coconut milk as well to really nail in or dial in to that Wagamama flavor. Or do this one, which is, I think it's probably closer to what Japanese people actually have. And as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, it all helps the channel, and we appreciate everybody doing that. Thank you so much. Until next time.